And we are on the air. Tonight I am joined with Daniel Galvin, also known as Vaco, to talk about a very important topic that unfortunately oftentimes just goes under the radar because in the world and internet climate we live in, it seems like all everyone wants to talk about is USA, USA, USA 24/7. But anyway, that's maybe a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Daniel, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Hello. I'm Daniel, or you can call me Baco. I actually don't mind how you wanna call me. I'm 23 years old. My pronouns are any pronouns: he, she, they. I don't mind. I'm
Mm.
a mechanical engineer, and af- I'm like pretty lefty in terms of social and economic things. And I'm Mexican. I speak Spanish, and I know a lot about USA politics and the global North politics. But I often see that nobody cares about Latin America or Mexico or any of these places when we have like a big history in terms of feminism, LGBT issues, and socialism. So I came here to talk about, well, one of those topics.
And we are very grateful to have you on. You know, it's just I completely agree with you that it's a very frustrating thing having America, and I mean even not just America, other global North countries dominate the conversation so incredibly, especially when there's so much going on in Mexico. Now, would you like to give everyone kind of a bit of a broad-based overview about what are some of the most important feminist issues in Mexico right now?
Well, in reality, almost every single issue in USA is the same here in Mexico and in Latin America, like 111. You know, like if in USA is bad, here in Mexico is worse. The main issues that we are tackling right now in Mexico in terms of feminist issues is sexual harassment,
Mm.
is feminicide, and most importantly, like wage difference, sexual discrimination, and as well sexual liberation. They are still
Mm.
pretty much important here because we have this thing called machismo. Machismo
Mhm.
here in Mexico and in Latin America comes from the word macho, which means
Mhm.
male. uh, the macho is basically this idea of the hypermasculine man, the one who is extremely strong, has to provide, never shows any emotion, that kind of thing. So machismo is basically the idea that men ought to be like this, and women have to be like uh, submissive. They cannot express their opinions and everything. So a lot of the machismo in Mexico um, is like the main focus against feminism. Like feminists has to fight against the culture of machismo in Latin America in general.
Yeah. So it kind of sounds like machismo reminds me a lot of the concept of toxic masculinity that
Yeah,
a
basically, to
lot
be
of
honest.
that feminists, you know, in the global north talk about. But I think, you know, uh, the issue when it comes to dealing with these topics is that oftentimes people start to feel like they're being attacked. You know,
Yeah.
when we criticize traditional masculinity, it doesn't necessarily mean that we hate men or that we have any sort of issue with men. It's just the way that it's commonly expressed and the way that it's acting like right now is the problem, and it's damaging for women and men themselves.
Yeah, let me give you an example of this actually. Here in Mexico, we have the slogan "Muerte al machito," which is mean death to the macho, to the machito.
Hmm.
And a lot of people actually find it offensive. A lot of people feel attacked because, um, I mean, there is nothing wrong to be the stereotypical man. There is nothing
Hmm.
wrong with being trying to be strong, stern, to show only emotion to those who are close to other people. There is nothing inherently wrong about it. But to be a macho doesn't mean that. To be a macho also means to be sexist, to be misogynist.
Mm.
Uh, so when feminists say mortal machito, it means to kill that idea, to kill the culture of machism that permeates everywhere in Mexico, that say that women are inferior, that men are superior. So a lot of people like conflate the idea of machismo with stereotypical masculinity. So
Yeah.
when they're like masculine, they feel like, oh, they're calling me a machito, they're calling me a macho, and that I hate women even if I don't. And it's like, no, we're talking about the culture surrounding it. We're not talking about you.
Mhm. Exactly, and I think that that is, a lot of the problem when people talk about social issues is that they get defensive if they feel like they are under attack, if they feel like something they have is being threatened, and so they take it personally, even though it's meant as a social critique. And honestly, if you see the idea of a sexist man that dominates women and treats them badly, and you think, oh no, they're talking about me, I think that maybe you should do some self reflection.
Yeah, like we're talking about, oh, we hate these sexist chicks that hate on women and treat them inferior, and someone goes, oh, you hate me, and it's like, uh, you're the one that is saying that you're sexist. We're not saying that.
I mean, you played yourself, basically.
Yeah, if the shoe fits, like, I mean,
Okay. Yeah, and I another thing when it comes to like I guess feminist issues in Mexico is that I noticed an interesting thing when it came to a recent news story about the Mexican Supreme Court voting 10-0 to decriminalize
oh
abortion.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
you know,
yeah, go on.
so obviously this is a great win for pro-choice activists and women everywhere and in Mexico because everyone has the right to make the own choices that they want with their own body. But I thought that the reaction from American liberals was very interesting. They seem to be angry and flabbergasted that Mexico could be more progressive on the social issue than America.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. Here in Mexico, here's like the kind of culture that, oh, we hate USA, and I think almost everywhere in the world except for USA, part of their culture is, oh yeah, we hate America. Um,
Yeah.
we I mean, it's part of that. But here's the thing: I do believe um, a lot of Latin America, especially, is way more radical than USA,
Mhm.
especially since we didn't have like years of propaganda. Like every
Yeah.
single piece of propaganda against social issues or economic issues that we have, they the strongest one actually came from America, from
Mm.
movies, TV shows, news from USA especially. So when we talk about like, oh, here Mexico have another culture surrounding feminism, it's because like the pieces of propaganda are not as strong as they're in America. So we can
Mhm.
actually do a lot more. And well, first of all, here in Mexico, I'm from Veracruz. From Veracruz,
Mhm.
Veracruz. The state is called Veracruz. The city is called Veracruz. And
Mhm.
this is the oldest port in all of America, or at least mainland America, because the oldest are in the Caribbean, of course. So
Mhm.
my city is 500 years old. So
Wow.
we actually have like a lot of history, and is
Mhm.
everywhere like this in Mexico, is everywhere like this in Argentina, Colombia, everywhere in Latin America. We have a lot more of history because we start to count it from the conquista to the colonial eras, and I feel like a lot of people in America actually start to count it from the independence. Like before that, they don't care.
Yeah, which is a really interesting sort of phenomenon. Like, I don't think I know of a culture that is more like almost willfully blind to its history than America.
Yeah,
And, history seems to, they sort of started at the immaculate conception of the perfect American Republic in 1776, um, rather than, I don't know, like when, maybe at the founding of the Iroquois Confederacy, or I don't know, when settlers started to come across and settle. Like, I don't know. The only bit of American independence history that I think most Americans are aware of would probably be Thanksgiving and the Salem witch
yeah.
trials.
I actually have a theory for why it's like that. This actually allows me to talk a little bit more about the history of Mexico and the history of feminism. And
Of course,
think
sure.
I think the main problem with America versus Mexico is that Mexico are mestizos.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere in Mexico, everyone is of mixed race. We are not only indigenous, but we are also Spanish. Meanwhile, in America, the big difference is that there was not as big of a race mixing. There was a lot of segregation. There was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of immigrants. So the culture is a little bit more diluted, and they don't have a stronger roots because, for example, indigenous people here, of course, have the roots, their the strongest roots in Mexico, but we, the general populace, like me, that I'm not directly indigenous, I still have pride in that culture because that's still my culture. Meanwhile, in White America, White American doesn't care about the indigenous culture because it's not part of them. They have
Mm-hmm.
another one.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It's, and not only do they have another culture, this other culture isn't actually based on necessarily their roots in Europe, but
Yeah.
this manufactured culture of the melting pot.
hmm And for example, here in Mexico, the one of the most important women during the Conquista,
Hmm.
and it was like an extreme controversy, and we actually use her name kind of as a bad word, and is the Malinche,
Mm.
Malinche. I don't know if you have heard of her.
Was she a translator?
Yes, La Malinche was an indigenous woman that was sold as a slave to Hernán Cortés,
Hmm.
and she was one of his wives and had the first mestizo kids in all of the conquests from Europe to Latin America. And the
Hmm.
thing here in Mexico, we use the word Malinche or Malinchista to denote someone who has betrayed the country. And
Mm.
during a lot of history, we saw like the Malinche as this traitor, this person who abandoned all Mexico and all Latin America to pursue her own dreams and help the rape of everyone, when in reality that's not the truth. Recent feminist movement, I believe from the 90s or 80s, actually took away that idea of the Malinche being a traitor to
Mm.
actually being what she was, a victim. She was sold as a slave. She was forced to translate, forced to have Hernan Cortes' children, but she didn't have a say on this. And the fact that most of our history we saw her like as the villain when Hernan Cortes was the villain says a lot of things about well our history, how we view women during all the years in Mexico.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Like this idea, this sort of victim blaming that, you know, um, that a woman couldn't possibly have been abused or used by a
Yeah.
powerful man, that it had to be something that she chose to engage in, that there had to be some sort of malice behind it. Um, and it's completely ahistorical. And, we see similar sort of mythologies, although with maybe a bit less pejorative, in the idea of like in the pop culture conception of Pocahontas.
Oh yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and
actually, I believe Pocahontas basically had more or less the same role as Malinche, right?
yeah, um, she did become a wife to two different Englishmen. Or actually, no, it wasn't two different Englishmen. It was one different Englishman, and she saved the life of John Smith, who was, I think, at the time, a explorer slash governor of Virginia. But I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me.
Okay.
I didn't research the history of Pocahontas before
Yeah,
this
it's
stream.
okay. It's okay.
Um, so I'm actually kind of interested. Do you think that this myth or this understanding of Malinche as this traitor, do you think that this has implications for victim blaming in Mexican society? Is this?
Yeah, completely. Because it is the thing. In pre-Hispanic eras, before the Europeans came here to Las Americas,
Mhm.
we had different cultures. We had different interaction between men and women. Of course, the women were still designed as the mother, as the caregiving, and everything like that, because it's actually part of human nature.
Yeah.
But the problem is that a lot of the ideas that women were inferior, a lot of the ideas that women were deceptive and everything like that, did come from the Spanish people that installed their culture on us. And when it came to indigenous people that still lived during the colonial era, their culture started to change,
Hmm.
trying to keep on their original ideas of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, and it doesn't clash with, well, the Spanish.
Yeah. So um, this kind of culture clash between, on one hand an indigenous identity, on one hand a Spanish identity. Um, in some ways, you could see things like the Day of the Dead as an opposite of that, because
Oh
that's
yeah.
more of a synthesis.
Yes, actually, Day of the Dead is the synthesis. It's actually one of my favorite holidays ever,
Mm.
and is literally the synthesis between the Catholic culture, especially Catholic, and
Hmm.
pre-Hispanic culture. Because the Day of the Dead, it was a way to remember those who has passed. It's a kind of a ritual that it was done every single year to remember people. But a lot of the most hardcore part of things, like using actual skulls and everything, it was changed from the Catholics. Because part of the conquest, it wasn't just like enslaving us or whatever. It was converting them to Catholicism,
Hmm.
and oftentimes it means, okay, we cannot accept part of your culture, but we can like change a little bit. We allow you to have it. For example, um, well, uh, I guess I think you have more like a Christian upbringing, I would assume, instead of Catholic.
Um, yes, my parents were basically they belong to the United Church, which is an
Okay.
amalgamation of a bunch of different Protestant churches in Canada that joined together so they wouldn't become irrelevant.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that we have the Las Vírgenes or the Virgins. For example, of course, of Virgin Maria or Mary, who is the mother of Jesus. And
Mhm.
then we here in Mexico, in order to become more Catholic, the church started to create more virgins, la Virgen de Guadalupe, la Virgen Santa Maria, or whatever, which were not only like saints in the sense of, okay, they were people who helped Jesus or whatever, but
Mhm.
also indigenous women, and like in a way to create a new myth, a new religion here in Mexico. like, okay, yeah, you see that indigenous woman, you see how she did everything. She did it not because she was following the pre-Hispanic religions, but because she was Catholic, and now she's the saint of the Catholics in this area of Mexico. So almost every single town, not state, not country, but town, has
Mhm.
their own virgin, which is kind of a saint for them.
You know, I think this is something that the Catholic Church loved to do. Even in Europe, they would take aspects of pagan belief system and then repurpose it for their own ends. And
Yes.
you see that in Mexico as well. Um, one thing I was interested to ask you, have you noticed that compared to other branches of Christianity, and I find this especially odd, the Catholic Church actually does have a lot of venerated women. Now,
Yes.
one thing I noticed about Protestant Christianity is that it honestly seems to remove a lot of the women from the story. But when you go to the Catholic Church, well, there's Mary, she's the mother of God. There's countless, dozens, hundreds of female saints. And then there's also in nunneries areas where women are able to gain some degree of political power. But when you get to Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, there's none of that. And I'm not exactly going to come to bat here for the Catholic Church as a progressive organization.
That was
Um,
good.
it's absolutely not. And I think it's bizarre, really, that there are still no women priests in this day and age. I know that there are some branches of Catholic that are trying to challenge that, but it is frankly astonishing to me. But I think that it's kind of an interesting thing that at the time you could also look at the Protestant Reformation as trying to turn back the clock on Christianity to make it more patriarchal.
Here is the thing. I believe, at least here in Latin America, when it comes to women, especially during the colonial era, this point where the indigenous people and the Spaniard were already like starting to mix in the case system was in place and everything. If you were a woman, uh, either a mestizo or criollo or whatever, the
Mhm.
only way to get an education, the only way to be something more than just a stay-at-home mom, it was to become a nun, was
Mhm.
to devote your life to the Catholic Church and learn theology and preach it and everything like that. And it was not only for education. A lot of women actually did it because they were fleeing from abusive households, from forced marriage, from rape. So a lot of these women actually did it as a way to liberate themselves from the patriarchal structure that was everyday life. And of course, they were in a patriarchal structure in the church, but it was one in where they had a lot more of power, especially when women were also a teacher from men and from other women. A big important figure, I don't know if you have heard of her, is Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz.
Sir Juana de la Cruz? No, I
Sor
can't say I
Juana,
have.
Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz was a nun during the colonial era in Mexico, and she's literally one of the biggest feminist icons. And even to this day, a lot of feminists still use her image because
Mm.
she did a lot of poems criticizing the patriarchy, criticizing men who believed they were above everything else, and the fact that during this era, when the patriarchy was as its strongest, like she didn't have she didn't have any worry to speak her mind. Also,
Mm.
I believe I don't know if she was either a lesbian or bisexual, but she also spoke a lot about sexuality in women, and
Mm.
and talking more about sexuality not only from an heteronormative form way, but actually what it means to be a woman who loves other women. So
Mm.
that's something important for feminism. here in Mexico and in Latin America, and I believe everywhere else. But the idea of the liberation from women doesn't only include from the patriarchy, but also from the heteronormative.
I found this article on this website called qspirit.net. So I don't know how
Mhm.
reliable it is, but it has some information about Suajano de la Cruz that if anyone is interested in watching this stream, they can check out. So I'm just going to add that to the description. So you can, or so the people watching rather can more inform themselves about this really interesting woman. I'm really glad you brought her to my attention. I hadn't heard this before. So
Mhm.
something I'm interested in, and I'm not necessarily sure I really have heard too much about, is how women fared under the period in Mexico when it was governed by the Party of the Institutional Revolution, under what was called the perfect dictatorship.
Okay. The which party?
PRI.
Yeah. Okay. So this is post-revolution. I'm going to give you a little bit of history here, like kind of
Sure.
quickly. After the independence of Mexico in the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
we installed democracy, we installed presidents, and after a while, then it comes into power Porfirio Diaz, which is it starts a period called the Porfiriato, where he starts to re-elect himself multiple years until uh, the Mexican Revolution appears, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of women actually live in power uh, to fight as Adelitas, which is the name that we use to the Mexican warriors, the Mexican female warriors during the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
They serve a lot of purpose, and when the when the revolution ends, these women say, okay, our only job is to be a teacher. We don't want to be a teacher anymore. We did a lot for this country. We want to do a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the the right for work and socialist movement started to take place,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of feminists during Mexico history were not only feminists, there were socialists, communists, and LGBT activists even from that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most important part I'm gonna talk about is the protest of the 68 or during the protest during 1968. I don't know if you have heard of them.
I haven't heard specifically of the Mexican protests. I do know that 1968 was a year of massive protest all across the world, though.
Yes. So all of these protests started in 1942 when El Instituto Politécnico Nacional, the EPN, it
Mm-hmm.
was a university. It's one of the most important universities nowadays. But back then, it was just like 5 years since it was built, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everyone attended school, men and also women started to attend a higher degree education. But the problem was that the SEP, the Secretary of of Public Education here in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
didn't recognize the decrees that okay, yeah, you studied, you are now a professional. For some reason, the SEP didn't want to give authority to the IPN. They and then a few protests uh, all around Mexico City started to appear, so students could get a lot of right. And then something happened. During that time, it was the PRI that was in power, and instead of saying, "Okay, I'm going to listen to you, I'm going to give you this right," they sent policemen and firefighters to stop the protest
Mm.
and started killing the people. There were 6 dead, including a woman who was killed by an axe for a by a firefighter. It
An
wasn't
app.
just yeah, an axe. It wasn't like okay, just gonna like punch them and and shoot them. No, actually, a firefighter took an axe and started chopping her. So yeah, you
Yeah.
know,
So apparently, Jason Voorhees was on the police force
yeah,
during that stage of Mexican history. So, if I understand you correctly, initially the Mexican Revolution was a pretty good thing for women,
yes,
letting them be able to enter into careers that were more than just teaching. But as the PRI got more and more corrupt, it started to shift, and then it kind of all came to a head in this really bloody put down of a protest in '68.
yeah. So um, that was in 42, in 1942, right?
Oh, I see,
So
1942.
so it started just as rights for students, both men and women. And then because of the demonstration of power, there were following protests for other students in 15, no, in 49, 52, and 56. And during that time, the feminists also were attacking and protesting the PRI because they were asking for more reproductive rights. The only thing they had at the time, it was the legal right for abortion, but in case of rape, and let me read you this because it's kind of crazy. If you were a woman in what, well, let me see, in 1930, in 1932,
Mhm.
you could get an abortion in case if you were raped, if you weren't hated by the community, if you hid the pregnancy from the community, and if the child that you were carrying, uh, it came from an unmarried couple. So imagine you were raped, you wanted to get a abortion, you could get it. But if the community hated you, okay, you can get the rape, but you get 1 year of prison just because people hated you for some reason. And if you if you were raped by your spouse, by your husband, then you could get the abortion, but you were to face 3 years in prison.
So you would face 3 years in prison for the crime that your husband did against you.
Yes, exactly.
Ugh.
So women actually started to protest a little more from this, especially from terms of abortion, get more rights. The idea of equal pay started to become a thing because after the revolution, there was the idea of every worker should get equal pay depending on their work,
Mhm.
but the government only like respected that law when it came to the men. So if you were a woman, you could get lesser pay than another woman. And if
Mm.
you went to the court for that, they didn't care. But if you were a man and you get a lesser pay than another man, then you could get that to court and the court actually did something, but not if you were a woman.
Hmm. So obviously that's like extraordinarily unfair because
Yeah.
why on earth should it be any different if you're a woman or a man? You should have the same level of pay if you have the same level of skill and hours being put in. And of course, this is still something we're still working on to this day,
Yes.
unfortunately. Um, but so these were the main issues that were starting to make women
Yeah,
agitate a little bit
and
more.
let me just finish with this of the 68. So
Sure.
these problems started to aggravate. A lot of more protests started to appear, not only from feminists, from other students, from socialists as well. And it culminated in the protests of 1968 because during that year, Mexico City was going to be uh, the center of the Olympic Games. So we had the Olympic Games during August of 1968. So from the start of the year, the protests started to gain a lot of traction, and The main focus was, of course, actually I learned like this way, like it was only for the rights of the students, but a few years ago I started doing a lot more research, and it wasn't only that. It was for the rights of students. It wasn't for the right to protest. It was for the rights of reproductive rights and equal opportunity for women. It was for LGBT movements. It was for the Socialist Party. And the protest, the main focus of the protest, it was give all of these people the rights that they're demanding, and to take from the power the PRI and institute a socialist government. Actually, during the 68 protest, that was the idea. They didn't want the PRI anymore. They didn't want a capitalist system. They wanted a socialist system. And they used the Olympic Games as a way to attract international attention, so they could get a lot more leverage. They started at the start of the year, and what the pre did is was, well, first thing, it was espionage. Um, it was political incarceration. It
Mm.
was also uh, taking up people, they tortured people, and everything ended in the massacre of Tlatelolco, en la masacre of Tlatelolco, of Tlatelolco's massacre. Tlatelolco is a city in Mexico City, or what is one of the cities surrounding that. There
Mm.
was a protest, and from 200 to 300 people were killed there, literally like 10 or 15 days before the inauguration of the Olympic Games. So
Mm.
it was at that point where the protest ended. The government tried to censor everything to the point that even uh, set fire to a building so they could destroy all evidence, all filmed evidence of the protest happening.
So no one would be any the wiser that they had actually killed
Yeah,
300 people and cracked down.
yeah. Actually, during the whole protest of the 68, I believe it was a 3,000 incarcerated people.
Wow. And, it really makes you wonder why anyone would vote for the PRI in the modern day. Like,
Yeah.
wasn't Enrico Piano Nieto, who
Mhm.
everything I've read on him basically seems to paint him as the Mexican equivalent of like Emmanuel Macron.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, except I feel like Macron was a little bit more confident and less like an idiot and less. Didn't he also like there was some corruption involving him? Well, I mean, there's always corruption in government,
Yeah.
but where
The thing about Enrique Peña Nieto is that a lot of people voted for him because he was a pretty face. Mostly that, to be honest. If you talk with older women, especially during the elections days of that campaign, a lot of people wanted Enrique Peña Nieto only because his face, because he was cute.
really? Ugh, well, I
Yeah.
can't judge too much because the same thing happened in Canada with Justin Trudeau. I
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
know this girl I knew, her sister, she lived in America, but she had Canadian dual citizenship. She crossed all the way across the border just to vote for Justin Trudeau because she thought he was good looking.
No, yeah, it happened here. But here's the thing: at the start of the pre, there
Mhm.
was another party, which is the PAN, and it used to be the opposite of the pre. It was less conservative, more pro workers. But as time went on, the problem is that the pre and the PAN became both conservative parties.
Mm.
So when it came to elections, you could either vote for the PRI, who is ultra conservative, or for the PAN, who is more or less conservative. So a lot of the time was either PRI or PAN, because there were other three parties like PRD or Partido Verde as well. But the problem is that they're equal to the three parties on USA. Like nobody cares for them. They could maybe win a election in a singleton, but when it came to bigger issues, to the presidency or the state or a city, usually it was either pre or pan.
Mm. And all of this seems to have kind of changed recently because in 2018 there was a massive landslide for AMLO.
Yes.
And what do you think of Emmanuel Lopez Obrador?
Okay, so if any Mexican ever see this, I'm going to get a lot of flag, but I actually don't like AMLO that much. Um, here's the thing. AMLO did something pretty important, which is to take the power away from the band and the PRI. He did something that no one else did, and he painted himself as the president of the people, president of the non-folk, and he he said a lot of things that were true. For example, that our our politicians were extremely corrupt. Everyone knew which politician was corrupt, but no one did anything. And he went to power with the promise that he would institute this investigation to jail all of these politicians and actually ex-president, not just any politician, but ex-presidents. The problem when it came when he started being in power is that any of his solutions were never systematic, were individual. When it came to okay, let's help minorities, his ideas wasn't okay. Let's invest in education. Let's put more money in business in this community. It was okay. Who wants to get free money? You have to go to the internet and register, and we're going to give you a welfare check. And it's like okay, that's cool. But a lot of these communities don't have access to internet. How are you going to give this money to them? And when it came to the corruption in the government, what he did is he constantly points at this person in specific is a corrupt politician. I got proof. We're going to jail him. So I'm going to make a poll for every Mexican to ask, should we jail this politician? When it's like, don't you have already proof? Can you like go to court with them? Like you are saying that you have the proof, but you are not doing it. You are just like posturing us. See, we are doing this progress. He has he has done a lot of good, but a lot of his things is more like a spectacle.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. Is that he does seem almost like he really enjoys the showmanship aspect
Yes.
of being in charge. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, when I look at or I read news stories about AMLO, and I'm like, okay, this guy kind of seems, um, at least stylistically, reminds me a lot of Trump. Not necessarily in terms of the
Yeah.
content of his politics, but when it comes to how he markets himself, this does seem
Yes.
very much like, okay.
Um. Something important to note is that he has this show called El Mañanero, which every morning, every single morning, except I believe for Sundays, but every morning, he holds a press conference. And it's not like, oh, every week, no, every day. So you could like wake up at I don't know, I think it's 7 or 8 a.m. Turn on the TV and you see your president giving a press conference about things that are happening and everything. And it's like, okay, that's cool because you can see your president doing something. You don't see him like every 2 weeks, every month, every time something big happens. You see him like even in the most boring stuff. But at the same time, it feels like this kind of show that see I'm doing something because sometimes like journals comes to him and say, hey, I'm hearing about this problem and I'm going to I wanna know what our president knows and everything, and he's like, but that is not happening. And he's like, but I just talked with people in the community. And he's like, no, I got another data. And he's like, um, that's kind of weird.
It's like a denial of reality in some
Yeah.
instances. And I think it is good to be communicative with the public, but there's a very difference between communication and showmanship and self promotion.
Yes. I'm going to be sincere. At least something that has Morena properly is to
Hmm.
support to some degree like feminist movements, and to some degree.
Hmm.
There is a big difference between Morena and AMLO, but here in Mexico, there is not a real difference. The idea is that um, when you become president, you have to
Hmm.
leave behind your political party. Like Enrique Peña Nieto was a president that came from the pre, but he
Hmm.
wasn't pre anymore. He was just the president. The problem with AMLO is that he still Morena. Everything he talks about Morena is my party or party, and it's never like, oh yeah, this party that works. So that's a big problem, right? So when it comes to AMLO, he has say a little bit of weird takes on feminism, but when we're talking about Morena as a political party and
Hmm.
like to the lower levels, they have helped a lot of feminist movements, and a lot of politicians in the lower levels actually
Hmm.
support these movements. And even some, you can say, it's just publicity or whatever, but they actually also participate in the market. So at least in the most baseless ones, right?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm really saying that Marina is like a bad party or anything. I have some skepticism of the leader, but
Yeah,
a lot of the policies that seem to be happening, it does make it clear that this is the best government that Mexico's had in a very long time.
yeah, to some degree.
um, so I think, we should kind of talk about like what are some of the issues that feminists are facing in Mexico right now.
So
You know.
uh, I actually wanted to talk about something specific that happened a few days ago, and that's kind. I actually didn't know it was going to happen, but I was kind of counting on it to happen. So that's why I was so happy that you say, "Oh, let's this Tuesday," because well, today is the second day of Dia de los Muertos. It's a very important celebration here in Mexico, and
Mhm.
I wanted to show something that happened in Ciudad de Mexico yesterday or this weekend actually. Let
Okay.
me share. So, wait. Okay, let me see.
So the share button's right next to the cam and mic. I don't know
Yeah,
if you've ever used StreamYard before.
yeah. I'm just okay. Here. You tell me when it shows.
It shows.
Okay, so here in Mexico we have something called altars or altares, which is
Mhm.
basically a way to remember deceased people.
Yeah.
Here in Mexico, we don't have the same reaction to that as other people in other countries have. We view that as something good to remember the
Mhm.
dead. We actually, well, me personally, this weekend I actually spent my days and night in the graveyard, cleaning tombstones and everything because it's part of the tradition. And
I
in the altars, eh,
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that's a really great tradition, and I wish that, that was an attitude that was more common here as opposed to
yeah,
where there seems to be like a fear of death. Like death is an entirely negative thing, and there's also this sort of weird relationship with the dead where people just don't really want to think about it, and if they have a gravestone, they barely visit it. I don't know, it's just kind of a
yeah.
weird relationship.
And so every year, what we do is that we put an altar, and in this altar we put photos of the deceased, the favorite foods of the deceased, and not only flowers, but especially cempasúchil, which the idea of that flower is that allows a path to be made from the land of the dead to the land of the living. If you have seen Coco, it's actually like that. It is pretty true to that.
I have seen
So
that movie, and yeah, I love it.
yeah, it's pretty good. In Spanish, it's amazing. all of my all of my mother, my grandma, a few of my aunts actually not only cried but actually like saw familiar faces in the characters, because like yeah, Mama Coco reminded me of my grandmother,
Mm.
because look at almost exactly like her. Anyway, so the feminist movement in the feminist movement in Mexico, in Ciudad de Mexico, what they do is that they did the first feminist altar that Mexico has done, at least, or properly in display.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a few things that I want to point out. First thing is this thing that it says mujeres autogestivas en contra de la violencia económica. What it says is self-managed women against economic violence. Is part of what I was saying, that the feminist movement, it wasn't just like women and only women. It was about socialism. It was
Mm-hmm.
about the LGBT rights. It was about everything. Um, Here you can see these pictures. Uh, these are women, but babies, children, older women that have gone missing, that have been killed, and you can see every single cross that you see here is a name. Claudia, Elidet, Anna, Angelica, Itzel. These are not random names. These are the names of different women who have suffered this violence, that
Yeah.
have died because of these things. So it's not like, okay, what's a female name? No, these are actual people.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see from all ages, it's not only older women. These are like women in their 20s, in their 15s. This looks
Mm-hmm.
like a 3, 4 year old.
Yeah.
And like I said before, this one here uh,
Mm-hmm.
is a representation of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. Like I said, she's extremely important to the feminist movement because she was one of the first Mexican women to speak against the patriarchy. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of feminists today have a lot of respect for her. And I want to read what it says here because when I read it, it made me cry. And a lot of friends of mine cried from this. Um,
Mm.
we have this tradition that is called Calaverita, which is basically a poem to the Calaca or Katrina, meaning the dead. Because here in Mexico, the Green Reaper is a woman, actually. Funny enough.
Mm.
So we often, during these times, we make a Calaverita, a poem speaking about people that have died or people that are still able with us, and we make fun of the dead. We make fun of La Calaca, or we respect her. We talk about her in many ways, and
Mm-hmm.
this is, I think, the most important thing about this is that it's both a calaverita and it's not a calaverita, like it says no, because calaveritas are supposed to be fun, and in
Yeah.
this case, it kind of made me cry. So I'm gonna read the translation. Yesterday I dreamt of La Calaca. We were drinking wine and she said, I didn't take them. I found them in the road. They said, they're searching for us. We are missing. Tell our mothers to never forget about us. We want to come home, but we can't find the way. So the
Mm.
idea of the Caloritas Society is supposed to be fun, to be lighthearted, to make fun of the
Mm-hmm.
dead. But in this case, it's a poem to remember the fact that these are not people who have died and that we are happy that they're in a better place. These are people that we were lost when they weren't supposed to be gone. These are
Mm.
people that should still be here with us, but at the end of the day, because of the system that we live in, well, what can we do but to remember and fight for them?
Yeah. And I can understand why, this was such a powerful poem for you and all of other people to read, because it's, when you think of the scale about all the people who've vanished into the night, and now you have no idea where they are, and their families have no idea where their bodies are. I read somewhere this Amnesty International report that there are 75,000 missing people in Mexico.
Yeah. I'm gonna say something that is kind of hard for me. It is right in my city, Veracruz. There is a movement that
Mm-hmm.
is confirmed of only women, mostly women. These women are mothers
Mm-hmm.
that they have lost their daughters, they have lost their sons,
Yeah.
and the government here, the police have done nothing to take for them. So what they done is they come together to pay private investigators. They became private investigators to find where these women and men have disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of the city, in the skirts of the city, what this woman have done is gone with shovels and start digging and have found
Mm-hmm.
the bodies. What the police haven't done, these mothers have dedicated their life exactly to that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard because the victory they have chosen wasn't justice because they couldn't attain justice. The victory they seek is to know what happened to their children.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea to go outside the city, start shoveling in the ground, and then find your dead kid, and that be the victory is kind of hard to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, what about accountability for the person who put them in the ground in the first place?
Yeah.
And I, I, I don't know. When I hear statistics, like I read that Amnesty International report that 10 women and girls go missing every day in Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's just heartbreaking that it seems that there is this inertia, especially within the police, around this issue, that they just seem apathetic. I've read stories about police officers actually falling asleep while people were reporting missing women cases. Like, they
Yes.
literally do not care at all.
Yes. That's actually true. 100% true. And I want to show some other images.
Sure.
These are some images from the feminist protests in CDMX and in Ciudad de Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, they are. I'm not going. I don't want to compare it to BLM, but they're
Mm-hmm.
almost to the level in terms of size, in almost terms of uh, aggression, because
Mm.
people here like to criticize feminists because they're just aggressive, they're destroying everything, they are painting uh, painting with words the or statues and everything. But here's the thing: for the last 10 years, feminists has done peaceful marches. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there are more peaceful marches than has been aggressive marches. And every time one hits the news, people here use it as a way to mock the feminists. There is a famous feminist show, or well, not show, March, that one girl, what she did, it was contemporary dance. She started
Mm-hmm.
dancing in the plaza and speaking about how she's dancing from her sis for her sister that can't dance anymore with her.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people here use her as a meme. Like, oh yeah, she's just this ridiculous feminist that is dancing and doing anything. She thinks that she's is going to change anything. So feminists get frustrated and started to become more aggressive until uh, things actually started to happen. And
Yeah.
one tactic that has been permeated here in Mexico and everywhere, starting in Argentina, actually, we kind of copied that. It was one, to write the names of every girl that that have been victim of sexual harassment, or that has been victim of a feminicide, or has gone missing, and you can see places where the the walls are covered with names.
Hmm.
And not only in Mexico, also in Jalapa, which is the capital of my state.
Hmm.
A few months ago, I went there, and the last March was like, I don't know, almost a year ago, and the names are still in the walls. The names
Mm.
are still in graffiti there, painted as a way to remember what has happened.
So this sort of,
Um,
a lot of this is so
mhm,
reminiscent, the whole mocking of women for,
yes,
doing, oh, it's just, look at them doing such a weird thing. Why are they doing such a weird thing? Well, you didn't pay any attention to them when they were doing those peaceful protests, when they were being non-confrontational. You didn't listen. And how can you get upset at someone for getting angry at you when you don't pay attention to them and ignore them while they continue to suffer? I mean, I think it's a ridiculous sort of idea that a lot of people have, is that you should always try to be, always don't try to be angry, always try to be calm. You go out in your evening best, you have this nice little
uh,
march that the police have agreed with, and then you go back. And as quaint as that is, and as much as I think that is better than doing nothing, you need to have a bit more of a pushback, you know
yeah. And the thing is that it doesn't sell news. Being honest, like the news doesn't care about the peaceful protests, because it's like, oh yeah, these people marched from point A to point B and they asked for this, and then it doesn't get clicks, it doesn't get views, nobody cares about that.
Mhm.
But when people didn't care about those 200 marches, peaceful protests, and everything, then they become frustrated, and then they go and become more aggressive so they can be heard. And then what is happening is that the news go, hey, you see, these people are aggressive. They don't care about safety, they don't care about our history, they don't care about anything. We should stop them, and we should not care about what they're asking. And even if we care about what they're asking, we are not going to give it to them because it's not the proper way. So it's like, what can you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, something that we don't necessarily look at enough is just how complicit the media is in all of this. You know, just by choosing what not to talk about, and then when they do talk about things, choosing how they talk about it, how they frame it. You know, there are so many opinion pieces of basically these boring rich people complaining about, well, I might superficially agree with what you're saying, but why are you asking for it so angrily? You know, that opinion has been had over and over and over.
Yeah.
And but they never get tired of publishing it.
No, I'm going to be honest. I understand why a lot of people have that opinion. I used to have that opinion. Like, I was like, oh, why have to be so angry? Just ask it properly. Why be? This is a democracy and everything like that. But then when you start to be in this circle, when you start
Mhm.
to actually see all the times they have fought and everyone just ignore them, you
Yeah.
start to become frustrated with them. Well, alongside with them, I mean, because you see, like, yes, why wouldn't you be angry? Why wouldn't you ask this screaming? Because when you ask it this with signatures, when you ask it this with pretty please, nobody care.
Yeah. They just they read your nice letter and they throw it in the bin. Um,
Yeah. I wanted to show this other tactic that became popular, and
sure.
this case is kind of close to me because this happened in the Instituto Tecnológico de Veracruz, my university.
Mm. Yeah.
So here we have something that we call tendederos. I don't know how you say it in English, but the tendedero is where you hang your clothes.
Oh, like a coat rack or something.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is that everywhere we start seeing that people start writing like the names of the sexual harassers, the name of victims, and everything like that. So
Hmm.
what started happening in a lot of universities is this movement of tendedero. You go every women in the university, including teachers, including staff, they write one of these signs talking about their experience, giving a message, writing the names of their harassers, writing the names of misogyny in the staff. Actually,
Hmm.
in these pictures, I see a few of my friends, and a few of the things that says, for example, lástima que la maestría y el doctorado no quita a misóginos y acosadores. It says, it's a shame that a master's degree and a doctorate doesn't take away the misogyny and the harassment. And
Mm.
here it says, vengo a estudiar, no a que me estudien. I come here to study, not to be studied.
Yeah.
What says, clases con el profe José García Morales, igual incomodidad, seguridad. Classes with the teacher Jorge García Morales equals being uncomfortable. Uh, no era paz, era silencio, it wasn't peace, it was silence. Uh,
Mm.
no pueden derribarnos, they can't stop us. No me gusta ser acosada con la mirada. I don't like to be harassed with the gaze. Another things. Uh, quiero respeto, I want respect. Quiero estudiar, I want to. Quiero estudiar, quiero respeto y tú eres mi profesor. I want to study, I want respect, and you are my teacher.
Yeah. And have you yourself witnessed any of these teachers acting
Yes,
like inappropriately?
yes. Multiple times. I have heard misogyny jokes. I have heard
Mhm.
sexist jokes. I have heard teachers say to my female classmates that they should. Well, I am a mechanical engineer, so you can see like uh, this is a university for engineering, so you can see like what's the environment. And a lot of teachers have said things like, you should just drop out and become a stay-in mother and stuff like that.
Ugh. Yeah. So basically the whole stay in the kitchen stuff.
Mm. And not only for teachers, but also for another students. Here we see
Mm.
a few of the students that were called out, not only students in terms of, oh yeah, this is my classmate, but students in positions of power. Um,
Mm.
Here this girl what she did is uh, after everything was put in the walls, she started reading stories about what some teachers did, some students did. And when I say students empowered, I mean the student council, that a
Mhm.
lot of them, when it came to problems with teachers and everything, some of them, if you were a woman, they would only listen to you if you accepted like their flirting and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
the most important part of this is that it wasn't just a display of love. This is wrong, but the feminists and the movement in my city and these women in my university, what they did is that between every one of them, they hired a lawyer and they submitted every single one of these stories and every single one of these signs as as part of the proof for the court case. So something
Mm.
could be done in the university.
Well, I really do hope that their petition to the court is successful, and that
Yes.
that action is taken, because honestly, there's no place, in my opinion, for sexism anywhere, but especially in a school, especially a place of learning, which is supposed to be open to everyone and
I
open
agree.
to new ideas. It shouldn't be a place where people are intimidated and harassed and pushed out just because they don't, yeah, just because of their gender. Absolutely
Yeah,
unacceptable.
I fully agree.
So,
Um, mhm.
um, I was kind of curious. Like, you say that the main sort of push in feminism is like that is to combat sort of machismo. Is there anything like that you think is like really like that? I'd actually be curious to hear your opinion about some systematic changes that could be made in Mexico to make it a better country for women.
Mm, okay. First of all, if the first systematic change I would do is with the court system and the
Mm-hmm.
people that are in the court system, the police, because the main problem is that okay, yes, our culture have led to a lot of horrible things, but in the meantime that we're changing our culture,
Mm-hmm.
we should be punishing uh,
Yeah.
that culture that we have. So the first systematic change would be in the police. It would be in the court system.
Mm-hmm.
Stop uh, stop allowing people to make judgment based on gender and sex. Um, Give a lot more of training to the police because here, if you want to become a policeman or a policewoman, you have to undergo training for 3 to 5 months, and it's tough. And even that, 70% of all the policemen in Mexico, 70% of every single policeman in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
has not undergone that training. Like,
So they have absolutely no real means of defending
yeah.
themselves or defending others. They've just been
So
handed a badge after a few months, and here you
so
now have all the
so
power of the law.
So imagine, here's the thing: we have academies for policemen, right? And after you go to the academy, you get this like as if you were to any other school, like you are now a policeman and you are certificated in the bare minimum, and blah blah blah. 70% of the police force don't have that. So 70% of the police might be sexist, might be colorist, might be machistas, might be
Mhm.
uh, extremely authoritarian,
Yeah.
and that's a big problem. So that's the first systematic issue that I would address. Second one would definitely be education, because
Mm.
I've been a teacher. I'm not a proper teacher, but I have worked in elementary schools. I have worked as a private tutor. I have done a lot of these things.
Mhm.
And our books are lacking. Like a lot of
Mm.
teachers do teach properly, but when it comes to the books, imagine a single page for the reproductive system, like a single page, one for the female and another one for the male, and the next page is the respiratory system or the circular system, and it's like, wait, what is the rest of that?
So there's basically like nothing really in the way of a good like sex education system.
Yeah, because I'm gonna be honest. 90% of my female friends from elementary school,
Mhm.
they became mothers at the age of 14 or 15,
Whoa, that
and
young? Wow.
yeah, and more or less 50% of my friends from middle school became mothers during middle school or during high school. So
Mm.
it's not something like, oh yeah, it's just girls at the age of 18 not don't become mothers. No, it's about preventing girls from the age from 13 to not become mothers. And a lot of conservatives here, especially religious conservatives, are opposing
Mhm.
this because only the parents should teach about these things, and it's not true. Because even if the parent can teach about these things, even if the parents have their best interest in mind, they don't know everything. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the teacher knows everything, but we can have accountability for the teacher, but not for the parent. If a teacher is teaching wrongly about sexual rights and the reproduction and everything like that, we can do something about the teacher, but we cannot do something about the parent.
You cannot fire a parent.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what you gonna do? You gonna take the child away? It's going to be worse.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that maybe if there was more like In Mexico, do you have like free contraception at your school?
Mm, yes and no. When I was in school, and even now, there was nothing like, oh, you can just go to the infirmary and ask for some condoms. Well,
Mm-hmm.
in university sometimes, but in high school and middle school, no. What it will happen is that from time to time, there were these sexual education campaigns. They happen every semester, both in middle school, high school, and university, where they gave condoms and they taught about how to use condoms and everything like that. And in high school and in university, what they do is that not only they do that, but they offer free HIV test and for other STDs. So it's like, okay, kind of cool. Every semester you can go for free to university and test for that. And if you want to go to the hospital to do it, you can do it as well for free. But when it comes from the school on itself,
Mm-hmm.
no. There is no single project right now like, oh yeah, if you go to the infirmary, you ask for the nurse, hey nurse, I want to know more about that. Could you give me some condoms? No, you have to wait for that to come or to go directly to the AIMS, that is our hospital.
Yeah, I really think they should be just more available, because I think that that's one of the best ways you can cut down on teen pregnancy is
Yeah,
educating people
completely.
on how not to get pregnant. Like, um, when you were going to high school, was the focus more on abstinence? Like, oh, just don't have sex until you're married.
Uh, Here is the thing. Here in Mexico, the culture surrounding sexual education are two things. One
Mhm.
is, okay, sex exists, just don't have sex. And the other thing is, what? Why are you talking about sex? Just shut the fuck up. We are not going to talk about sex. Sex doesn't exist. You are too young to talk about sex. But mom, I'm 15. No, no, no. You are too young. So that was a big problem, especially in middle school, because here is the fun thing. You're talking from the first world perspective, where the problem starts in high school. Here, our problems start in the last year of elementary school and in the 3 years of middle school. So
Oh.
it's like, oh yeah, this is not a problem in high school. By the time you are in high school, most of your friends already know what is sex. Most of your friends already have sex. Everything that comes about sex, it starts at least on middle school.
Hmm.
So
So,
yeah, I remember when I was a kid, when they gave us the talk in our school, they
Mhm.
did the whole, okay, kids, we're going to talk about sex and reproduction. So today is going to be for the boys. So every girl leave the room, and tomorrow we're going to talk about the girls. So every boy has to leave the room, and it became a problem. It
Mm.
really became a problem because sexual education here in Mexico is really bad, to the point that uh, I'm 23. I got friends that are 24, 25, friends that are also men, and they come to me and ask me, "Hey, how do the menstrual cycle work?" Because they don't know, and they have a lot of partners and they have a lot of sex, but they don't know. And it has gotten so bad that I have female friends that are older than me asking me how their menstrual cycle works. And it's like, okay, look, I'm gonna explain it to you. Do you understand that I'm not the one that is going through this? I'm not the one that should, well, I should know this, but it's not expected of me to know this. It's like,
Yeah.
what is going on with sexual education in this country?
Yeah, in Canada, I won't necessarily say the sexual education system was good. Granted, I think I had a uniquely bad one where we crammed
Mhm.
sexual education into the last 3 days of middle school and the first year of high
Yeah.
school. I also had a really creepy male teacher, who made it seem really awful. So he was like, "There's nothing wrong with talking about sex. You can talk about it anywhere." even to me, even in the halls. I'm like,
Yeah,
ugh,
I
you
have
just seem
had
like a pedophile.
teachers like that. That's the worst thing because I have teachers like that, and you will. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's good that it happens like this, but you should expect like this kind of teachers at least on university, like where the student is older and you go like, hey, this is creepy, but at least we're talking about older people. Everyone here is an adult. Like you shouldn't do that, but at least is between older people and everything. Yeah.
Mhm.
But the problem is that I have heard that kind of things since I was in middle school. Like
Yeah.
teachers that were too friendly with my female classmates, teachers that
Mhm.
were uh, that in middle school, in high school, in university, and it was always a we call it here un secreto a voces, a secret to voices, which
Mhm.
basically means that everyone knows about it, but nobody says anything.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like I feel like there's a culture of silence sometimes around, these predators who have this power, and you sort of feel like there's nothing you can do about them and no one will ever take any action. So why even speak up anyway? And and I think that's why it was very clever of you to say, let's start with the courts, let's start with education, because really people need to know that they can hold these people to
Yeah,
accountable, and we need to actually change the systems that are in place right now in order so that people can. Like,
I mhm. Go on, finish, please.
I think that there's like the court system, for example, is extremely unjust. I think that really, if you're having like a sexual violence trial, you should have a gender neutral jury. And by that, I mean an equal ratio of men to women, as opposed to
Yes.
having male judge, male prosecutor, male lawyer, male jury. And how, like, when you do things like that, of course, no one's going to be sympathetic to the woman's perspective in this situation because no one has really experienced what she's going through. And I think that that's an example of where there is just this whole thing where there's no way to hold these people accountable because the people who are supposed to be holding them accountable have no interest in doing it because oftentimes they're perpetrators themselves. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I, as I said before, I like education. I want to be a teacher actually, and I've worked as a teacher multiple times.
Mhm.
And I'm an asshole to teachers. A lot of teachers I hate with passion, and especially older teachers. Not because the fact that they're older, but because the way education works here, the way you can become a teacher here, is that you can hold your position forever. I
Yeah.
had a teacher in university that literally had a worker, like one of those four-legged workers to help him
Mhm.
stand. He was like 80 years old,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to leave the job. And it wasn't because he was good. It wasn't because he loved teaching. Literally, I once heard him say directly that he didn't want to stop teaching because in his house was boring, but at least in the work he could talk to other teachers. So it's like, why are you here? And the problem with these kind of teachers, the older teachers, are the ones that are more likely to be sexist because they are the ones that, well, live through a culture that was extremely sexist. And
Mhm.
when you want to do something about them, I literally have talked to principals, to people in power and the staff in my schools, and when I utter the words, "Oh yeah, this teacher," they immediately went up. Yeah, we cannot do anything about it. And like I'm telling the worst horror story about what a teacher's doing, and they're like, "Oh no, yeah, we have to do something. Let me write this out. Who was it? Oh yeah, it was the teacher." Blah, and they go, "Oh no, sorry, we cannot do anything about it. He has longevity here. He has worked a lot of time, so um, we cannot change anything. So
Mhm.
I'm sorry."
Since when did the length you've worked with someone become more important than the quality of work you actually provide?
I don't know. I mean, I understand the idea that the more you work on something, the more expertise you got. But the problem becomes when it's because you work so long, it means that you are good, and that's not true.
Yeah. Oftentimes, people will not oftentimes people ossify if they stay in the same thing forever. They don't want to
Yes,
improve and they have no incentive to improve. They
yes.
just stay as bad as they ever were. And they're like, and you can just see them there. They're basically rotting in front of your eyes. Um,
I once had a teacher that said to us that 10 years ago he discovered the perfect way to teach a class and that no other teacher has come to his point, and he was one of the worst teachers I have ever had because the idea that no, yeah, I'm perfect, I know exactly, I'm not going to change anything. You know what was his way? He gave us some prints that were made in a mechanical browser, and they were made in the 80s,
in the
and those
80s.
were they were the copies of the copies of the copies of the copies of those original prints. And it's like, teacher, I cannot read what the fuck is here. What is this class?
This, I would honestly get more information out of this from just reading the textbook from the 1980s.
Yes, yes.
And when you are being outperformed by the 40-year-old textbook, I think that's the time that you need to admit to yourself that you've just picked the wrong profession, or maybe you need to innovate a little.
Yeah, I do believe I do believe the younger generation is the one that is going to change a lot of things. Uh, I've worked with a lot of kids. A lot of younger girls are actually more aware about these things.
Mm-hmm.
I have teach to a lot of middle school girls and high school girls, and they often are like open about the problems that they have had. For example, once I was working as a private tutor in a little school, and
Mm-hmm.
I had this 13-year-old girl. She was like pretty friendly with me and everything. And sometimes in class, everyone would talk about things. And she told me, "Hey, teacher, I got an Instagram. Do you let me follow you?" I was like, "No, no, this is my personal Instagram. I don't wanna do that." Uh,
Oh.
and then she said, "Oh well, it's okay. I don't mind it because you seem cool. I usually don't give it to other people because every picture I post." They start flirting with me. And she's
Mm.
talking about not like her classmate. She's talking about like 20 years old, 30 years old men, and she's like 13, 14. And I'm like, dude, like, in what world do we live that 13 years old girls can say, like, yes, older people are harassing me? And it's like, at least she isn't saying like, oh no, this is good or whatever. Like, she's aware of this. And
Mm-hmm. She understands that
it's,
it's a problem.
it's better that she's aware of this, that she understands that it's wrong. But I would love to live in a world where no girl at her age uh, should face that kind of thing. Like, a girl in middle school should worry mostly about her friends, mostly about uh, her her school, her social life in that small circle. She shouldn't worry about like this 20-something-year-old dude saying, hey, girl, don't you wanna go for a date or anything? It's like, dude, what the hell?
Yeah, yeah, and some people just they never get over their sort of entitlement when it comes to teenage girls, and it's really weird. And we honestly we could do a whole other stream just about that topic alone.
Yeah, no, no,
Anyway,
it's extremely weird.
I would like to because I have dinner, and I would like
Yeah,
to put a wrap on this conversation. Is there
yeah,
any
sure.
is there like a concluding statement that you would like to give the people who are watching?
Um, Yes, if anyone is watching, all I want to say is that, well, we talk about a lot of feminism in Mexico, we talk about women issues, but I want to say that do not forget that these problems are not only in Mexico, they're everywhere in the world. And even
Mhm.
if sometimes people are happy than in USA. People have women are better because blah blah blah. Uh, don't hear things are still bad. We are still fighting for it. From time to time, the support of the global north is actually like a lot because our culture doesn't come only from us, but have come from USA. But when it comes with problems in USA, problems in Canada, problems in UK, uh, your culture is not determined by, for example, Mexico. It's not determined by Argentina. It's not determined
No.
by by Colombia. So I would like to invite everyone to read a little bit more of the history of Latin American countries in the feminist movement, and also to recognize the fact that here in Latin America we are a lot more closer. We are less individualistic. We are we have grown in a culture about community.
Hmm.
So that's why not only the feminist movement has been about sisters, well, the feminists often call themselves sisters and everything, but
Hmm.
also about workers, about LGBT people, genderqueer people, and all of this is intertwined. In the last few years, actually, uh, socialism has left the public eye in Mexico, and
Hmm.
the feminist movement is mostly feminist movement plus LGBT. But during the whole history has always been LGBT, socialism, and feminism. The left doesn't just mean, oh, you're a feminist, you don't care about other issues. To
Hmm.
me, being part of the left is being part of everything of this. If you are a socialist, you cannot say, I don't care for the rights of LGBT people, or you cannot care for the rights of women. If you are a feminist, you cannot say, I don't care for the rights of the workers and I don't care for the rights of the LGBT community. If you are part of the LGBT community, you cannot say, I don't care for women and I don't care for workers. Because at the end of the day, women can be all of those three things. Workers can be all of those three things. LGBT people can be all of these three things. I think this is the idea of intersectionality, right?
Absolutely. That's what intersectionality is all about, is that all of these things matter and that none of these struggles exist in a vacuum and that you can't just kind of like, oh, I'm a feminist, but only a feminist. I mean, but what about the rights of, LGBT women? Do you support trans
Yeah,
women? Do you support lesbian women? And if you don't, then that's a significant chunk of women you don't support. You don't
yeah.
support working women. Well, that's a massive, that's most women, and if you aren't, coming to bat for all of these people, then your feminism doesn't really translate into anything more than a catchy slogan on a
Yeah,
Starbucks cup.
and I don't want to say like if you don't support, well, no, I don't want to say if you aren't crying for LGBT issues, being a feminist, you are not a real feminist. No, that's not true. But the point is that if you are a feminist, if you are an LGBT activist, if you are a socialist activist, you should support each other because
Work
all of
together.
these problems help each other. And even if you don't want to say, okay, I'm not a feminist, so I don't want like put my hand on there because I don't want to say anything wrong. Okay, that's fine, but don't stand in the way, or at least help them. Don't say what you want to say because you don't know, but say what they're working for.
Hmm. If you personally, don't feel like you're an authority on the issue, find someone who you think has like actual experience. And I
Exactly.
guess that was kind of what I was trying to do here tonight, because you're someone who actually has experience working with feminists in
Yes.
Mexico, on the ground. And thank you for your work. I appreciate it a lot. And thank you for coming here on my
Thank
channel
you.
tonight. And I'm grateful to everyone who's watching. Um, have a great night, Daniel. And to everyone who's watching, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and that
Yeah.
gray bell that YouTube added for no reason. Um, thank you so much for watching, and ta ta for now.
Yeah.